Hello and welcome to My Bonus Life, episode 164. I was really pleased with how my last video was received by you guys, my care team. As I've told you, I've been avoiding topics of politics, religion and sex just because I didn't want to end up having to be a referee in the middle of any kind of online fights. You guys have all been fantastic online. It's been lovely to see. Really good debates and behaviour and all of that. I've been really happy. So first thing on the agenda is my shirt, and today I'm not wearing a shirt. So as you can see, my abdomen is so much better than it used to be. I'd call myself pretty much fully recovered back to about when I was in my mid-20s. That was about what it looked like. So that's all good. That's quite pleasing. Next thing on the agenda, and it is going to be the majority of this video, I'm going to talk more about Australian electoral stuff, because I was surprised how interesting it was, but also how much I didn't know, and that when I checked, I was able to find out things about it. And I'd like to go into that a little bit. But actually first, my back is just a little bit itchy. So yeah, there it is. That's the good stuff. Okay, now, as you know, I'm back working at the West Australian Department of Health. That is a state government department. And because of that, I get sent certain emails. And I want to show one to you. That it's public domain information. It's not at all dangerous for you to be able to see this email. But it's to do with a thing called caretaker mode. So I'll pop it up on the screen. It's fairly large, so I might even have to blank out my own face. But there you go. It talks about the continuation of the caretaker mode. Even though we know who has won the election, we are continuing in caretaker mode. And they're talking about this thing there called the caretaker conventions. And that's what I want to talk about just briefly, because it hadn't occurred to me before I worked for state government that such a thing existed. But now that I know that it exists, it makes a lot of sense. What it basically means is, in the period between a government official, be it federal or state government, announcing that there will be an election coming up, and sometime after the election, when I think technically it's when the new government is sworn in, is when the caretaker convention officially ends. When you're in that period, you have to abide by these conventions that don't allow you to do things like sign contracts that the alternate government might have a big problem with and would potentially immediately dismiss and want to be out of, thereby costing the taxpayer a bunch of exit fees. So during the caretaker period, at the state level, we wouldn't have been able to sign any new contracts that were controversial. If it's a contract to just get some scalpels and face masks, I think both sides of Parliament would be happy with that. But we wouldn't, for example, be able to say we're going to have the new maternity hospital be at Fiona Stanley instead of, or to be in south of the river instead of north of the river, when in reality, the location of that maternity hospital is right now a very controversial topic within Western Australia. So we would not be able to announce any contracts to do with that during the caretaker period. So that's caretaker. Now, second thing is, one of my lovely care team, a lovely woman called Maureen Kidd, commented on my last video saying, I'm in WA and I've never used an ID to vote. And you would have noticed in my video, I said, I've got my photo ID, I'm going to vote. Now, when Maureen posted this comment, and evidently she's been voting for a while without ID, it made me think, am I wrong? Did something happen wrong there? Like it just was a disconnect for me, and I wanted to find out what the truth of the matter was. So I got online and I found that there is a bill, a piece of legislation called the Electoral Legislation Amendment Voter Integrity Bill of 2021. And I'll pop that up on the screen for you. I'll probably need to put it over 2 pages. And I'll read it out for you. The bill's provisions will require polling day and pre-poll voters to present some form of identification when they turn up to vote, ID will be checked against details on the electoral roll before ballot papers are issued. Presentation of ID will replace voters being asked for their name and address. So they won't ask what's your name and address, they'll just say, could you please give me some ID? Next paragraph, there is no requirement for photo ID. So the ID doesn't have to have a photo. There are numerous permitted documents to prove identity, including driver's licenses, passports, Medicare cards, proof of age cards, birth certificates, citizenship certificates, credit cards, bank statements, utilities, letters from the Electoral Commission, tax assessments, and several documents specific to Indigenous voters. Okay, so firstly, do not need to have photo ID. But if you remember, Maureen went even further. Maureen said, I didn't have any ID. So let's read the next paragraph. Voters without ID can also be vouched for if they are voting with a voter who does have identity documents. This provision deals with couples turning up to vote when only one has brought their driver's license. So you can vote with no ID at all, as long as someone that you're going with does have valid ID and they just vouch for you. So Maureen is absolutely correct. You can vote without any ID. And bear in mind, this bill came into force in 2021. And I think prior to this bill, you didn't even need anyone to vouch for you. You could just say, this is my name and address and vote. At least now, at the very least, someone has to vouch for you. So I found that interesting, and I didn't know that before I turned that up. Now, the next thing I want to talk about was whether or not voting is compulsory. Because I know in certain other countries, in the US, for example, I know that it's absolutely not compulsory to vote. So just to let you know, in Australia, well, let's do it in 3 sections. So we'll start with at the federal level. So here's the legislation at the federal level. It's the Commonwealth Electoral Act of 1918. And under section 245 part 1, it states, it shall be the duty of every elector to vote at each election. Under the Electoral Act, the actual duty of the elector is to attend a polling place, have their name marked off the certified list, receive a ballot paper and take it to an individual voting booth, mark it, fold the ballot paper and place it in the ballot box. Now that's very specific, but the next paragraph explains why they needed to do that. It is not the case, as some people have claimed, that it is only compulsory to attend the polling place and have your name marked off. And this has been upheld by a number of legal decisions. And I've got 2 of the legal decisions listed there. There was actually about 6 listed there. And you can see that that first one there is dated back to 1926. So way back in 1926, someone took the government to court saying, mate, I turned up to vote, and that's enough. I turned up. I don't have to vote. I have to turn up to vote. And the answer is no, you actually have to do these specific things. Even then, I notice it says that you must mark the ballot paper. What it doesn't say is you need to mark the ballot paper validly. So we know in Australia that there are people that do what we call a donkey vote, which is that you, well, typically will draw a picture of a donkey, but you can actually just either not mark your paper at all or draw an animal or whatever so that people see that, can tell from behind you've written something, put it in your paper and put it in your envelope and then put it in the box. And for all intents and purposes, you have voted. However, you haven't voted for a party, but you won't get in trouble. You've met all the criteria. So at the federal level, absolutely, voting is compulsory. Next slide. What's the case in Western Australia for the state? And as you can see on the page here, voting at state general elections, by-elections and referenda is compulsory. So the way I read that is actually in every state of Australia, voting in the state election is compulsory. And as it says there, and the penalty for not voting differs by state, because I have checked this up. But as you can see there in that 4th paragraph, the penalty for first-time offenders is $50, and this increases to $75 if you've previously paid a penalty or been convicted of this offence. So $50, which is a significant amount of money, but it's probably not going to make you bankrupt, but it's significant. if you don't vote. Now, what is the case for local elections? And in this case, I could only look up Western Australia. Voting in local government elections is not compulsory, but all electors are strongly encouraged to participate and vote for their local government representatives. So there you go. At the federal and the state level, it is absolutely law that you will vote. At the local level, it is not. That's how it goes. So let me go back to the agenda, find out what I'm about to need to talk about next. Right. Oh, and I might want us to point out there is a bit of a loophole because you need to enrol to vote to be able to vote. Now, as it turns out, if you don't enrol to vote, as far as I know, when you then don't vote, you won't actually get the failure to vote fine because they're going off the voters registry, which you've never put your name on. So as I understand it, there are people that just have never registered to vote, have therefore never voted, and also have never got a fine. So you can do that, and there are people that want to. I think it's a shame, but that's what they do. Now, speaking of having the right to vote, my good friend Caroline was recently overseas when there was the state election that I voted in last Saturday. So I'll just ask special guest star Kazzy to come in.
Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle.
And tell us what...
Hi.
Hello. And tell us why you felt the need to go and vote, because it would have taken a fair bit of effort and you did have a valid reason. I should have explained, if you give a valid reason for not voting, your fine won't be, your fine will be cancelled. Now I checked it, and being overseas is actually a valid reason.
Yes, so I could have opted out. I did initially request a postal vote, but by the time they sent that letter to me, I'd already left the country. But I chose, when I looked it up, there is a place you can vote in London, which was convenient, which is at the High Commission, Australian High Commission. So I decided to go there and cast my vote. The reason I wanted to do that is because I think there's a lot of women around the world who don't get to vote and would like to be represented and have a voice. And I think, we as women, we say we want equality, and if you want it and you're given it, you should use it. And for me, this is my little quiet protest against the patriarchy, I suppose. But ultimately it's just, there's a lot of people fought really hard for me to have that right to vote, and so I like to use that.
Yeah, so just remind me, was that the suffragette movement that brought that about? Or?
So the suffrage movement was actually initially about getting equal votes for men and women, and then it kind of evolved over time and became more about women. And the term suffragette actually was coined by, in England, as a derogatory term.
Right. As a diminutive to say you're smaller than you think.
Yeah.
As in suffrage becomes suffragette because you're this tiny little thing.
Well, no, it was about the women. So the suffrage movement broke into two parts, and there were those who would fight for the vote using discussion and political means, and then there was another branch that sort of cut away that said these men aren't listening to us, we need to talk to them in the language that they understand, which is the language of violence.
Oh, so there was a non-violent path and there was a
so they were the militant branch, and they were termed suffragettes as a kind of a derogatory term, but then they said, well, if that's what you want to call us,
we'll own it.
We're going to own it.
And
they used it as a brand that they as a pride thing.
Now, tell me, so you would have been on the underground when you were in London. I believe there's a suffragette line, isn't there?
They've renamed one of the lines the suffragette line, which was quite cool. And it's the line, I can't remember exactly where it goes, but it goes out through the East London suburb of Bow, which is where the Pankhurst, anyone that's familiar with the suffrage movement, the Pankhurst family were quite well known.
Was it Emily Pankhurst? Is that her?
there was a mother and two daughters. So there was Emily, Sylvia, and Christabel, and I think Emily was the mother. I think.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, generally speaking, how was the voting process at the consulate?
Oh, it was really cool. So I turned up to, so it's in the sort of posh part of England where all the federal buildings are, and you know, it's the Australian High Commission, so it's got the flags out the front, and you have to press a buzzer to get in.
And some Aussie guy goes, "G'day, love, come inside."
Well, weirdly, it was a French guy, which I thought was really astounding. So I had to show him my ID, and then another girl kind of tailgated in the door with me and said, "Are you voting?" So we kind of went in together, and there was a group of people waiting, and we had to wait for someone to come and get us. So this guy comes down and takes us up in the lift, and so we're all having a bit of a chat. And it's a very fancy building.
I believe it would be.
Pictures of every beautiful beach in Australia. You know, there's quokkas and you know, and yeah, we just had to go in one by one to like an office, give them. Interestingly, I was not asked for ID either, although I did show ID to get into the building. But he was a security guard, I don't think.
Yeah, I do wonder, and I'm hoping that Maureen can give another comment and talk about that, because I suspect what's going on is we're just not enforcing it.
Yeah, I think so too. I think I heard there was a bit of discrepancies at various locations about whether or not you have to show ID. But yeah, and so then I went into this beautiful office, and there's a lady with a laptop, so I gave her my name, and she said, "Now you can," she gave me the forms and said, "Now can you step over to the polling booth?" And there's one of those cardboard
booths
set up in the middle of this office, and there's people just sitting around typing.
Oh, funny.
Yeah, so that was pretty funny. And then when I left, I asked the guy, you know, how many people do you get through here doing this? And he said, "Oh, probably over the week it's open probably about 200."
Okay.
Which, yeah.
It's a significant number. I mean, Western Australia's not a very populous state.
Yeah. 200 and of the group that went through, I think I was the only one that was just visiting. Everyone else was working.
Working in London or England or whatever. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that's good.
That's cool.
I did a little bit of footage.
Oh,
on the
do you
day.
really?
Yeah, I can share it with you.
I'll tell you what. Yeah, well, yeah, we'll have a look. Let's do it. Let's cut away to that now.
All right. I'm here outside the Australian High Commission, and I can vote here, which is very convenient. And so, you know, there were so many women who fought really hard for me to have this privilege of having the vote, and so I see it as an obligation. So that's what I'm going to go and do now. Obviously, I'm not going to film that.
Okay, so thanks for that video, Caroline.
No worries.
Yeah, that's good. We'll carry on.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Fine. Enjoy.
Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is talking about the history of the left and the right. So we talk about these two wings of Parliament, the left wing and the right wing, and I was quite curious to find out where that comes from. And it turns out it comes from France. So just to pop this up on the screen, I'll read it out to you. In politics, the term left derives from the French Revolution as the political groups opposed to the royal veto privilege. So we've got to start thinking now in terms of Republicans and monarchists, right? So those opposed to the royal veto, which was Montagnard and Jacobin, deputies of the Third Estate, generally sat to the left. Okay, so the left is the people that aren't happy with the monarchy. So they are the ones that want a French republic. They sat on the left, the presiding members chairing Parliament, while the ones in favour of the royal veto privilege sat on the right. So the original right wing were the monarchists or the royalists. That habit began in the original French National Assembly. Throughout the 19th century, the main line dividing left and right was between supporters of the French Republic and those of the monarchy's privileges. The June Days Uprising during the Second Republic was an attempt by the left to reassert itself after the 1848 revolution, but only a small portion of the population supported this. So that's where it all started. Let's go a little bit further, because we're going to find in modern day there are now some weird paradoxes or illogical things that have come from that, and I haven't fully researched them to know the answer. So I'm going to highlight some things to you, and if you're either a student of political science or you just happen to know the answers, please write them out for me, because I'm genuinely curious. So let's go on and expose those interesting paradoxes that I uncovered. Now, the first one I've got here is, what does it mean if you are liberal in politics? And the answer given to me by Google was, liberals have advocated gender and racial equality in their drive to promote civil rights and global civil rights movements in the 20th century, achieved several objectives towards both goals. Other goals often associated by liberals include universal suffrage and universal access to education. So we would say the Pankhursts, by the sound of it, were liberal in their politics. Now, let's ask the question, who is the Liberal Party in the United States? The Democratic Party, whose logo is the donkey, generally represents left-leaning, liberal and progressive ideological values, thus advocating for a strong government to regulate business and support for citizens of the United States. Okay, so let's be very clear there. In the United States, left is liberal. Okay, now next question. Is liberal left or right in Australia? In contemporary Australian political culture, the coalition, which is a coalition between the Liberal Party and the National Party, is considered centre-right, and the Australian Labor Party is considered centre-left. Australian conservatism is largely represented by the coalition, along with Australian liberalism. So there's our first paradox, is that and I've checked other countries, pretty much every country around the world, or every Western country around the world that I was able to find, liberals sit on the left, except in Australia, where they sit in the centre-right. Okay, fascinating. Now, I decided to make up a graphic to look at different countries around the world and see where they sit, what they're called, but also what their party colour is. And this is this graphic here, and it highlights a couple of more paradoxes. So firstly, you'll notice that out of USA, Australia, New Zealand, UK, Canada, and Germany, all of them except for the United States, the left-leaning party is red. For some reason, in the United States, it's blue. The other weird thing to notice here is, if you remember, the original Republicans were on the left. That when they, in the French start of all of this, they were on the left. And what's interesting is, if you flipped around those two figures from the United States, Republicans would be on the left, which would match the French origin. It would also mean the colour is now correct. So my first question to you is, was there something that happened in American political history that caused the Republican Party to move from centre-left to centre-right? Because their colour and their name both tell me that that should be the case. The other thing, weird thing to notice on here is, as I pointed out earlier, that the Australian Liberal Party is on the left. All others, the Australian Liberal Party is on the right. All others have their Liberal Party on the left. The other really odd thing here is the Australian Labor Party spells their name in the American English spelling of Labour, L-O-B-O-R. There's no U. Whereas in New Zealand and the United Kingdom, they spell it L-A-B-O-U-R, which is the correct Australian English, New Zealand English, United Kingdom English. So for some reason, the Australian Labor Party don't have the letter U in their name, that I find quite interesting. So something's happened there. So I'd be curious if someone could tell me what that is. Now, the other interesting thing I found was the German situation. A couple of things about the German situation. Firstly, whereas in Australia we have two leading parties, Liberal and Labor, but there are half a dozen other parties that sit off to the side. In the United States, I wasn't able to find sort of any dominant or semi-dominant third party between the Democrats and Republicans. If you could please comment below and tell me, do they exist and what are they called? I'd be curious to know, because it did strike me as unusual that in the United States there is really just the two. In Australia, there's the two main ones, but there's more. In Germany, there was like 8 major parties, such that it's very rare. I don't even know if it ever has happened recently where one party can form government on their own, form government without a coalition. It appears that every time Germany elects a parliament, it's a coalition parliament, because no single party can ever get the numbers. The other interesting thing I noted was that the Christian Democratic Union that sits on the right, whereas all of the other right parties were saying quite clearly, our party colour is blue, and it'd have an example, it'd be a navy blue. The CDU of Germany says, no, our official colour is turquoise. That was a very bad German accent, I do apologise. But I just found it interesting that for some reason they haven't gone with what I would call, what appears to be the classic colour of the right, which is a navy blue. They've instead very specifically gone for turquoise. So I'll just pop up on the screen this snip I took from the CDU's Wikipedia page, and you can see there down below where it says the official colour is turquoise. So I don't know why they didn't go with navy blue, and I don't know why they're particularly attracted to turquoise. If you're in Germany and you know the answer to that, I'm looking at you, Bettina, then maybe you can explain that colour choice to me. It was just struck me as a little bit unusual. So if we head back to our agenda, I know that I've done a couple of things there, so let me just catch up. So yeah, so the Liberals in the USA, the Liberals in Australia, the Liberal paradox, which is why is the Australian Liberals on the right when everyone else is on the left, the Labor paradox, which is their spelling of the word Labor, the Republican double paradox of why are they red and on the right, and why are they called Republican when the Republic movement from the French Revolution originated on the left. So there's 2 reasons the Republican Party seems like a paradox to me. And yeah, just a general question. Does anyone know any of the answers to any of these? Because I don't. I've simply noted that they don't follow the same pattern. I don't know why that is. Okay, so next thing on the agenda, back scratches. So Noel and I have had a bit of a chat. I was unable to get out to Perry's factory yesterday to have a go at laser etching. I'm going to try and do it next Saturday now. In the meantime, Noel and I have turned up a couple of ways to get the wood stock. So firstly, and I'll pop up a picture on the screen. Firstly, we can go to Bunnings and we can buy this Tasmanian oak. It's $22.50 for 1.2 metres. So that would make 3 40 centimetre back scratchers, which would mean it's about $8 in wood per back scratcher, and it is a very beautiful wood. So I could do that, and we may well end up doing that. I have bought one section of Tasmanian oak already that I showed you last week. Noel, in the meantime, has found one of his friends has a section of beechwood, and it's been described as beautiful to turn on a lathe. So we could either turn them on a lathe to make round scratches like that, or we could do the cutting and sanding as with the more flat white scratcher that I showed you last week that I don't have now. Noel has taken it because he needs to use it as a prototype. So the first lot will either be made out of Tasmanian oak or beech, or possibly a combination of the two. So we're making good progress on getting our wood species. I am still requesting JPEGs that I can test out with the laser etching. No one has sent me one. So I've got my email address down in the description of last week's video and this video. So if you want to send me a JPEG that you want me to do a test burn with, then I will. Or I'll just make something up and go with it. Okay, second last thing on the agenda is the beard. Now, Caroline has returned home and had a bit of a giggle and a go at me for how sort of scraggly it's looking. So I have agreed to be trimmed. So this is the high watermark of where I got to in terms of just letting it grow. I have been shaving my neck just because I don't like having hairs on my neck, basically. But this is the high tide mark. I've never had it this long in my life ever. And if you remember, I did have laser hair reduction as a 20-odd year old. So that's why it's so wispy. I did used to get a lot more hair than this, but yeah, the laser took care of that. So next time you see me, I am going to have somewhat of a trimmed beard. Last thing on the agenda is please subscribe and like, okay? I love having you on my care team. I love that so many of you get to hear the things that I've got to talk about, and subscribing and liking and commenting and all of that really helps. So please help us get to a wider audience. Okay, thank you from Paul in Perth and Kazzy in Perth. We're doing fine. Talk to you again soon. I hope your world is going great too. See you later. Bye.